What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Tablesetters covering all things baseball. As always, I'm Steve. Join my tag partner, Devin. What's going on, man?
What's up? What's up? Welcome, everybody, back to the show. Steve, we're almost at the All-Star break, which means Major League Baseball draft coming up. And we have the perfect guest to speak to about just that tonight.
So no warming up the bullpen. Our guest today is Jonathan Mayo, senior writer for MLB.com, where he's been covering baseball since 1999 for more than 2 decades. He's been one of the game's premier prospect analysts, compiling MLB's top 100 prospects list and serving as a key part of MLB Network's annual draft coverage. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. Thanks for having me.
So, Jonathan, we're excited to have you here. As Steve said, we know this is busy season for you, so let's dive right in. As I said, the draft is just 5 days away. There's lots of mock drafts out there. Most have the following players going somewhere in the top 3: Roch Cholowsky, Von Lackey, Grady Emerson, not necessarily in that order always. In your opinion, which of those 3 would be the most likely to fall out of the top 3, and why would you pick that one?
Boy, they seem so cemented in my head, and that those top 3 picks that I'm having a hard time figuring out. If I were to pick one, it would be Lackey, just because I could see, let's say, Cholowsky and Emerson go 1-2, which I think most people think is going to happen. If the Twins decide just to go, hey, we want Jackson Flora, we decide we want a college arm, then Lackey could drop. And they're looking at Jacob Lombard also. I think that seems less likely given how model-driven the Twins are. But I'll say Lackey is the most likely, and I don't like using the word most because it still seems like those are the top 3.
So we've been hearing a lot about Roch Cholowsky as the number 1 pick since before the college season even began, and I don't think really any of us disagrees with that, but MLB Pipeline recently updated its rankings, as you guys have been sharing on Twitter. Now Grady Emerson is the number 1 draft prospect. For anyone listening, what led to that change, and why did Emerson move ahead of Roch?
There really isn't very much at all separating them. It's 1 and 1A, but we started hearing from a lot of scouts that and not area guys on the national level who've seen a lot of both of them, that Emerson is better now than Cholowsky was when he was in high school. And Roch was a very good prospect coming into the Arizona high school ranks. And there is a strong likelihood that if, say, Emerson were to go on to college in 3 years, he would be perceived to be a better prospect than Cholowsky is now. So it's not as much a knock on anything Roch did or didn't do. He didn't run away and destroy competition this year, which is maybe a little unfair. His sophomore year was so insane at UCLA. But I think because they played the same position, there are some similarities in their games, and Emerson is perceived to possibly have a higher ceiling. That's why we put him 1 and Cholowsky 2. But there's not a whole lot of daylight between the two of them, at least in my opinion.
Thinking back to last year's draft, I would say most mock drafts did not have Eli Willits going number 1. I think Kade Anderson seemed like the pick there for a lot of people. Both guys have been great in their first pro year. Both have rocketed up the top 100. Your thoughts on Willits and Kade Anderson a year later, year into pro ball now?
Well, I'll start with Anderson. I think he's done exactly what people expected he might do. That's why he was, mentioned at or near the top of the draft. I think the only thing that held him back at all was, injury history in his past. But he was a super advanced college lefty who had really separated himself with the year that he had at LSU. And I think if he were in another organization, he would not be in Double-A. He might even be in the big leagues by now. But the Mariners are kind of stacked at the big league level. There isn't necessarily room in Triple-A. I think they're trying to pump the brakes as much as they can. But he's doing exactly, I think, what was expected, to a higher level. I mean, I think we thought he'd dominate, maybe not this much domination. Eli Willits is interesting because, a lot of people look at that pick and say, oh, well, the Nationals saved more money than they would have if they had gone in a different direction. And yes, that is true. But also, a lot of scouts really liked Eli Willits. He's super young for the class. He was one of those guys where people said, we may look back and realize that he was the best player in the class. And clearly those were the voices that won out in the Nationals draft room. And, so it was a kind of every once in a while the stars align where who you think is the best player, or at least on the same plane as who you're deciding to saves you more money, then it's a win-win. Now, I would not have thought that he would be a guy who would be promoted by now, up a level. I certainly didn't think the power would show up this quickly, but he's a really, really good baseball player. Can do a lot of things really well. And so even if, say, the power is a bit of a mirage, and I have no reason to think it is, but let's just say, he's not going to keep doing this because he is such a good defender, because he runs well, he's got such a good baseball IQ. He grew up around the game. All of those things, he is going to be a very good big leaguer, and it just might be happening a little faster than we anticipated.
So digging a little bit deeper on Seth Hernández and Kade Anderson, I know you spoke about Kade Anderson, what he's been doing. What gives one an edge over the other? Who would you want to start a franchise with if you had to pick between Seth and Kade?
Why do I have to pick? Can I have them both? That's a tough one. I mean, and so because we went back and forth, I think we started the year and we did our first corrections of our top 100, and Hernandez skyrocketed up, and then we moved Anderson ahead just because he's been so dominant at a higher level, and he's not that much older. Even though he was a college guy, Seth was a little tiny bit older for a high schooler. I'd be happy having the number 2 pick in this draft, and so if I don't get Anderson, I get Hernandez. Hernandez might have a slightly higher ceiling, if you really want to say, like, just because he's younger, I think he throws more pitches. He's had to adjust a little bit once he's moved up. The command was a little tiny bit off, and I haven't been able to dig in with the Pirates what that's about. It may just be trying to make the perfect pitch. Pitching in Greensboro is hard. He is still unhittable and missing a ton of bats, so that would be a good problem to have, having to only pick one of those guys. I think they both have a chance to be frontline starters who aren't going to take that much longer to be big league ready. I think Hernandez finishes the year in Double-A and is probably knocking on the door in Pittsburgh at some point in 2027. And that, of course, depends on what their major league rotation looks like at the time. But he's that advanced, even though he was a high school player.
It's fun to think about Pittsburgh possibly having Paul Skeens and Ashcraft and Hernandez all up there at the same time, Jared Jones as well. But those 3 guys we just mentioned in the last 2 questions, Willits, Kade Anderson, Seth Hernández, all just drafted last year, 1 year ago. They're all in MLB Pipeline's top 10 on the top 100 list. If you look into your crystal ball right now for this year's draft, which player or maybe players from this year's draft do you think we could see in the top 10 at this time next year?
Well, good. I like how you phrased that question because it gives a little time. We try not to get too excited about draft guys and crank them up too high. There are always exceptions, but obviously, I think Emerson and Cholowsky, that's the obvious answer. The first 2 guys that jump to mind. I could see, if one of the high school guys like a Jacob Lombard or even an Eric Booth Jr. take off, or a Gio Rojas, you're looking at the high school guys. I don't know that they'd be top 10 guys, but they could make that huge jump if they end up performing better than expected, sort of like in an Eli Willits kind of way. And then, I'm a big Jackson Flora fan. I think he has a chance to be a frontline starter. It's great stuff. The pitchability has come a long way. Of all the college pitchers in the class, he's the one who posted pretty much every Friday for Santa Barbara. Not the same level of competition as if he was in the SEC, but I could see him being the kind of guy like, all right, maybe you want to, depending on who takes him, start him a little slowly. You start him in high A, and then he's so dominant, and then he's in Double-A, and he's had a month dominating in Double-A. By this time next year, I could see him kind of jumping into at least into that conversation.
So right now, is there one player who's outside the top 20 in the mock drafts that you think we'll be talking about a year from now as one of the best rising prospects in baseball? And maybe what stands out about them right now, that they're just shy right now of outside the top 20, but maybe people are sleeping on them a little bit.
I mean, I think my inclination would be to take a high school pitcher because those guys tend not to float up as much. If it were before today and we were having this conversation, I might have said Brody Bamilla, but news has come out today that he's got something going on with the UCL in his elbow. He already had internal brace, so I still think he has a chance to be very, very good, but it may take if he ends up needing Tommy John surgery, then it's going to take a while. So I'll say the next high school lefty, that's Carson Ballman, who is from South Carolina. Big, projectable, has 4 pitches that might all be plus when all is said and done. Really throws a ton of strikes, and on top of that, I don't say he was the talk of the combine. He didn't throw or anything like that, but in terms of how he performed in interviews, that's not going to move the needle in terms of when he gets drafted. Some teams are just too risk averse to take a high school guy, and some teams are going to be all in. But if you're thinking, I really like this high school guy, do we want to roll the dice? And then he blows your socks off in an interview, you might feel more comfortable with or he kind of has the maturity that he's going to handle this transition to pro ball. I think that probably helped the Pirates feel confident in taking Seth Hernández last year, because he does very well in those kinds of settings, and Boloman does too. So he's a guy who, like with a lot of high school pitchers, we may look back and be like, he should have been, top 15, top 10. It was a little up and down for parts of the spring, but, we're talking about a big lefty with 4 pitches, with a good head on his shoulder. So he's a guy that really kind of jumps out to me. And then we'll go with a little deeper dive just because he is one of my favorite players to talk about. And that's Molovai Lavu from UCLA. He was their first baseman. Cholowsky got all the attention, rightfully so. But Lavu had a fantastic year, hit for average, hit for more power, did a little bit better. He's kind of guy, his bat to ball skills are so good that he kind of swings at everything, and tone that down a little bit to be a more effective hitter. He's a better athlete than people give him credit for. And one of the things that really stood out to me is that the couple of times that I interacted with Roch Cholowsky, he just kept asking, have you met the best hitter in the country? And would point at Lavu. So no, obviously that's a teammate being a good teammate and a leader, but also he saw what Lavu was capable of doing. And he's probably a second rounder. If someone wanted to pump him up and take him in that sandwich round area, I don't think anyone would sneeze at that. So he's not he's going to be a first rounder, but the dude can really hit. And so I think it's going to work at the next level.
So we got news recently that MLB would like to shrink the draft even further going forward, from 20 rounds down to 12. They want to raise the minimum draft age to 20 years old. There are a lot of strong opinions, obviously, out there about this. What do you think the consequences, intended or unintended consequences, are if the draft goes down to 12 rounds, if that was actually pushed through?
Listen, I am a fan of the draft. So any truncation of the draft, I'm going to pause. I will say that with the current state of minor league baseball, there are not enough roster spots for players coming in. So I understand from a pure looking at the number standpoint, we don't need as many rounds. I have a little concern, and they have said that this is not the case, but I do have a little concern that it would lead to further elimination of some of minor league teams, and I think that would be a shame. I think that I'm hopeful that this will just lead to a broader conversation about what can be done to make sure that the draft works for all 30 teams, that players are being given an opportunity, a real opportunity to prove themselves at the professional level, and are given the developmental tools needed to work their way up a system and reach that ultimate goal, which so few players ever reach anyway. So I think I'll leave it at that. I'm hoping that this is just a starting point for a conversation to address some things that maybe can be addressed to make it a better process for all the parties involved.
So another MLB proposal, we know the conversation, the headlines have been the labor negotiations we have over here, is about the obvious, the international draft. And the Players Association had called that, the head had called that, Bruce Meyer called it horrendous. Again, I want to be careful how we phrase this question, but in your opinion, do you think we need to have a change of the way international players sign with MLB organizations, or is there a current system in place that already has it right?
I think an international draft is not a bad idea. I think baseball's already moved in that direction with the bonus pool system. Gone are the days from years ago where teams could kind of just stash and hide a player You can't really do that now because there's been an increase in showcases. And yeah, that takes a little bit away from not the hiding of players, but the scouts who like are really hustling and trying to uncover every gem, unpolished gem that you can find. I don't necessarily mind in theory. I think the details probably need to be worked out for there being some kind of international draft that levels the playing field a little bit more than what the pool system already does. I think this is a natural step in the progression that started with the bonus pool system. I do think where they'll probably eventually run into trouble, and I haven't heard this brought up in a while. Once upon a time, there were hopes and dreams of combining into one draft. And when you talk to international scouts, it's just such a different animal, scouting and signing players there, that I think it'd be really hard to figure out how to do that. So, but having two separate drafts, I don't think is necessarily a terrible idea. And I say that without knowing what any of the details might be, how many rounds, what the bonus system will be like, any of that. But I'm not necessarily opposed to that.
We've got about 3 more questions if we can try to squeeze them in here for you, Jonathan.
Sure.
This next one, we often talk about, Steve and I, we talk about post-hype prospects on this show, guys who, for whatever reason, people aren't as excited about anymore or aren't talking about as much, even though they're still super young. Maybe they got called up and sent back down. Maybe there was an injury. Maybe it's just taken them too long to get the call. For example, fair or unfair, I feel like Ryan Waldschmidt recently already might start feeling like a post-hype guy after he was sent back down to AAA, even though we'll probably see him again at this point, some point this year in the major leagues. Is there a guy out there that falls into that post-hype category that you're still super, super high on?
That's an interesting question, because what so often happens is if it's a guy who has graduated off of a prospect list, we tend to kind of just let him slip out of our brains. There's only so much room in here, especially the older I get. So I think that gets a little tricky when, if a guy has graduated off. And Ryan Waldschmidt is still a prospect. He's only 23. He's still ranked 28th on our list. So just because a guy goes up and goes back down, I don't think necessarily points to him being, post-hype prospect, regardless of the age. I point out all the time and tell people to go look at Mike Trout's numbers when he first got to the big league. Now, granted, he was 19, 20 years old, so it is different, but he really struggled. So sometimes you see these young guys go down. I guess Andrew Painter is probably a guy that comes to mind just because he really struggled after missing all that time at Tommy John. Looked so good. Saw him in the fall league. Then it was kind of rough command-wise in that first full year, but I think we all kind of chalked it up to he hadn't pitched a full season yet, really, in several years. And then he made the rotation, and I thought he's going to be fine. I've been surprised with his lack of command first, in terms of control out of the zone, and then in the big leagues within the zone, how much he was getting hit. Now, I haven't dug in to see, is the stuff down? What's happening? Why is he getting hit so much? But again, he's only 23. With all the time he's missed, with all these struggles, I think he can go back down and right the ship and work his way back up. So that's a guy sort of fresh in my memory because he is no longer a prospect officially, but is still super young and just got sent down after struggling in his first taste of the big leagues.
So referencing the great work you guys do at MLB Pipeline, you guys recently updated the top 100 prospects list, and no one climbed more than Rays prospect Theo Gillen, who was the 18th overall pick back in 2024, a class that Devin and I have been discussing could end up being pretty historic. On the other side, no one dropped more than Mets pitcher Jonah Tong. Can you give us a quick synopsis of why you think Gillen is rising and why Tong fell, and what their current rankings say about both players and their standings and how people feel about them?
Sure. I think with Gillen, there was always a strong sense that he was going to hit, a good bat to ball. He was going to run, and he was going to be a good defender, especially as he continued to learn how to play the outfield. The biggest jump forward is that the power started showing up more than we expected. He's 20, kind of almost until the end of the year. Now the jump to AA has been a little rough so far, but I expect him to to get his bearings. He had an OPS over 1,000 in high A. It was his first taste of high A. He had missed some time. So I think it was more just things really clicking for him. Tong, again, still only 23, which is hard to believe because it feels like we have been talking about him for a very long time. But I think the biggest problem with him, as much as we love him, is that if he's not going to command the baseball, it's going to be trouble. I mean, because the fastball, it's an interesting fastball, right? It doesn't hit triple digits, but when it's good, because of because of this release point in the extension, it's really tough to hit. It's one of these invisible fastballs. But when he is not commanding it well, it's going to get hit because he's not blowing it by guys, and the rest of the stuff has not been great. So I think it was more just a hesitation, like, is that going to work? Because he does it a little unorthodox. He's not that big. You worry about him holding up, and then he's been getting knocked around. So we're not giving up yet, which is why he's still on the list, but we're a little concerned about it working long-term as a starting pitcher in the big leagues.
As a Mets fan, I'm hoping it works out because we could use some good news over here. But we're going to get you out on here on this, Jonathan. We really appreciate your time. This is a tricky one for the last question. If you could build your ultimate prospect, taking tools from different guys that are on the current list, or maybe even just came off it, up to you. Who are you taking for speed, hit tool, power, glove, and arm? If you could use those 5 tools of different guys.
Once upon a time, I did a story like this, like years ago, and we kind of combined names. I feel like I wish I had all the tool grades in front of me. That is a tough one. Can I just take Connor Griffin?
I mean,
the discussion.
Is that maybe? I mean, is
that a cop out? I mean, he kind of does everything really, really well, especially because the hit tool is much better than expected. I'm tap dancing here to try to come up with a better answer than that, but I don't know. I think obviously, I think if we really looked at each player's tools, we could probably come up with tools. I'm calling up my master spreadsheet as I tap dance here so I can try to sort through this and give you a better answer. But I think it's probably going to take me a little bit too long for me to find something, but let me see if I can come up with a slightly better answer for you.
I mean, honestly, Griffin's not the worst answer. Even if it's considered a cop-out, it's a logical cop-out, so I'll give you that.
I mean, so the thing is, it's interesting enough, I'm looking through our list, and we don't have anybody on a current list with a hit tool over 60 currently.
Interesting.
Right? Mm-hmm. So there isn't with Travis Bazzana when he was, first coming up, I don't remember where he ended up. So there isn't a guy who is, Luis Arias kind of hit tool. I mean, honestly, Luis Arias didn't have that hit tool when he was a prospect. I probably would go with maybe Ethan Holiday's power. I like Lazaro Montez's power a lot too. This all comes with swing and miss, but if we're adding a plus hit to it, Rainiel Rodriguez of the Cardinals probably has a really good combination of all of them. In terms of a run grade, I'd probably go Enrique Bradfield. And that I did that one without sorting my list here. I mean, we don't have too many 80 runners. He is one of them. He's also one of our better defenders. So, I think it's splitting hairs in terms of defense, but I might go with him as the defender as well. But if I could take Kellen Lindsey from the Dodgers, he's an 80 runner, and Enrique Bradfield's defense as a 70 defender. How's that?
I mean, it sounds good to me.
Solid. That's solid. sorry to put you on the spot there.
It's too many names and numbers to keep in my brain, especially because I'm so draft focused right now.
For sure.
Shifting back to the minor league guys, I'm like, nope.
Well, we want to get you out of here. We want to be respectful of your time. And again, we thank you so much for you taking time out of your busy schedule. Before we let you go, I want to give you the floor between your work with MLB Pipeline, as we mentioned, MLB.com, MLB Network, and your book, of course, Smart, Wrong, and Lucky, the origin stories of baseball's unexpected stars. Is there anything you'd like to plug or anything you've got coming up that you want our listeners to know? The floor is yours.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you guys for the time. Next time, let's not do it a week before the draft, and then I can give you guys a little more time. We can chat some more, but I'll throw out two things. One is a kind of a travel log documentary show that's been started that I host on MLB Network called Grassroots, Routes, where we've gone now to 5 different minor league cities and really dig into how minor league teams are woven into the fabric of different cities. And that's been really fun. And what's been really cool about it is that show was kind of born out of a side podcast and book project that I'm working on with my wife, Sarah, that is got minor league baseball as one of the pillars, but it's not as baseball forward as Grassroots is. The other main pillar is the arts. And the idea is we picked 5 different, not the same 5, there is some overlap, but 5 different smaller U.S. cities, and really dove into what makes community, what brings people together. Minor league baseball and the arts, the idea is, a low barrier to entry. Where can you go and have a shared experience that is, accessible to a lot of people? And we opened it, including breweries and coffee shops and things like that, and really digging into what makes these small cities, so incredible. And it's been really a way to build kind of optimism and hope and hope about what's going on, which is sometimes hard to come by these days. So it's been really cool. We're shopping the book to publishers now. We put out a 4-part podcast series called Something Worth Saving, Asheville, Stories of Resilience. We were in Asheville, North Carolina, 7 months after Hurricane Helene and all the damage and decimation there. And we ended up spending 2 weeks there and did 37 some-on interviews in all these different areas of the communities, including the Asheville Tourists, the minor league team. And really was just amazed at the resilience and how they had come together as a community to try to build back from this. And those are the kinds of stories where we're told. So 4-part series, wherever you get your podcast on Asheville. We're working on Cedar Rapids, Iowa as we speak.
Can I ask you,
awesome.
Jonathan, the Grassroots show, was Chase Selesky a part of one of those episodes? I only ask because he's a former guest of ours. He's in the Tampa Bay system, plays for the Durham, I believe, right now. Not, again, putting you on the spot again, but I thought I saw him post something about
when he was in Montgomery.
Okay, so when he was still with the Nationals.
Wait, no, so when did he? No, so last year he was in.
He was in the National system. Yes.
So that was
Yep.
It was Rochester. Yes. Also.
Okay. It was last year.
I'm pretty sure that was Rochester. Yeah.
Okay.
We did, one of the episodes was in Rochester, and that was really interesting because AAA is a whole different thing. It's not necessarily top prospects. It's guys who are right there, but they're not there. Some of them have families and kids. So we got to kind of lean into and tell some of those stories as well. Yeah, he definitely was a part of that episode.
So make sure you guys check out Jonathan on X. He's giving out all the great information. You guys can check out all the things we discussed on there at Jonathan Mayo on X, and you guys can check him out on Instagram at Jonathan Mayo B3, if I have that correct.
On Instagram? Yes.
On IG, yeah. So again, we thank you so much for your time, and we'll catch you down the line. Okay.
All right. Thanks, guys, very much.
Once again, we want to thank Jonathan Mayo for joining us here, talking all things MLB prospects and the draft, and really excited about all the stuff that's coming up in the next few weeks, Devin.
Yeah, man, great conversation. We know when I say at the beginning of the episodes, it's his busy season. I mean, he's in the thick of it right now with the draft coming up. Just updated the prospects list. There's a lot going on. So we do hope to have him back sometime, maybe for a longer conversation when it's not as busy of a season for him as well. But we got a lot of good information there. And I'm pumped up, man. I saw a different, I think Baseball America posted their mock draft. And as a Met fan, I was very interested in who they had going to the Mets. They had Justin LeBron going to the Mets all the way down in the high 20s, which a couple months ago I think would have been just unthinkable. So exciting stuff. We don't know how much of that stuff will come to fruition. We got a lot of surprises last year, if you remember. A lot of us were thrown off. So who knows? A lot of people are trying to say it's not going to be Cholowsky now at the last second. I can't quite buy into that, but I definitely didn't buy into the Eli Willits stuff last year. So I might be wrong about this one too. Who knows?
And I mean, we sound like a broken record, but the MLB draft becomes increasingly important every single year because of the pipeline and just being able to see these guys in the field much sooner than we have in the past. And it feels like imminently we're going to see the draft class 25 coming in here, and all of a sudden they're making an impact on the field. And it won't be long until we see the class of 2026 taking the field in an MLB uniform. And that's good for baseball. As we say, young stars all over the field. That's good for baseball.
Yeah, I mean, and one thing that stood out to me in Jonathan's answers was the Seth Hernández talk. Like, remember, this guy was a high school arm. He's drafted out of high school, and he's basically saying like it's probably not going to be all that much longer until we see him on a major league field. Not this year by any means, but if he ends the year in Double-A, like he said, and then kills it next year, who knows, man? Like we see really young position players sometimes, but it's pretty rare to see a super young starting pitcher come up. That's exciting to watch. Kade Anderson, Seth Hernández seem like grade A pitching prospects that maybe we'll see on a major league field in the next year or so.
And the other thing that's interesting that he did mention, and the important part, we hear about this a lot in a lot of different leagues and in a lot of drafts, it's the character and these interviews about behind the scenes and understanding the player. And that looms very, very large where we're not seeing that part. Of course, if it makes headlines in a bad way, we see it. But for the most part, we don't really get to know these players until they're in our local markets. So watching really that process play out, that is a whole other section of the draft that plays out where maybe we don't know why certain players aren't taking in the top 5 and they fall. It could be a character concern or just not alignment with the organization, their belief. There's a lot that goes into it outside of just the tangible skills in the field. And for us sitting here watching, we watch with bated breath because we want what's best for our franchise and our favorite teams.
Yeah, I mean, you think the character stuff and the mental stuff as well. I mean, the NFL draft, which is so widely covered, right? How many times do we hear stories about like, oh my gosh, this guy got one of the worst scores ever on the Wonderlic test? And then sometimes the opposite of someone who absolutely aced it. And, sometimes you're going to turn a guy down for that maybe you shouldn't have. And sometimes you might take someone for excelling a little too high that ends up, it's just a mistake. So you have to kind of put all the pieces together. If we had more time with Jonathan, honestly, I would have loved to pick his brain about, misses, like not just him or his colleagues, but like the entire baseball field. Like look back at some of the biggest misses in the past 10 to 20 years where a guy seemed like a lock and just didn't turn out. And even on the prospect list, how many times have we seen a guy in the top 5 of the prospect list and just, some of them end up being like more average Major League Baseball players. I think about, again, the Met fan in me, I can't help it, but like Ahmed Rosario was once the #1 overall prospect. Now he's had a nice long career, and maybe sometimes us fans, we inflate what it means to be the #1 prospect. It doesn't necessarily have to mean you're going to be a superstar. It could just mean like you're the best on the most reliable on the list right now. Didn't turn out to be an all-star kind of player, but still kicking it. Francisco Alvarez, another Met that once was either #1 or very close to it on that list. And again, not a bad player, but maybe not justifying that spot yet. And then I'm sure there's some players that are the opposite where they never were close to #1 overall on that prospect list, and they have turned out to be an all-star caliber player. So if we get him back on the show one day, those would be fun questions and stories to try to get out of him.
And honestly, it's very fun to just sit here and fantasize about these players and what they'll do in the field. But part of the process is just fun researching and as you and I did all year, watching college baseball, watch these guys play in meaningful games, and to see it kind of play out in real time of trying to put all the names together and figure out where they're going to go. Like I said, the MLB draft is quickly approaching, for me, the status of the NFL draft and the NBA draft for spectacle. And hopefully, as the years go on, maybe that's something that we'll see become more of a matinee thing or just a must-see TV thing for maybe not just the hardcores anymore. Make it about the casuals that want to tune in and learn about these favorite players, especially as we continue to say, the pipeline gets shorter. So Justin LeBron, you see him in the draft, all of a sudden you see him on a field. And I think that does play a huge part.
Yeah, and it just baseball overall, how quickly everything moves. I mean, it seems like just months ago where the White Sox fans were finally able to be excited because they were going to have the #1 pick. They weren't excited about the product on the field. And now think about it. How exciting is it after a 4-game series with the Guardians that they were able to split, fun series back and forth in first place, as I'm talking right now, at least. And now in a few days, they're gonna add somebody to their young crop of talent. Most of us think it's Roch Cholowsky, but somebody's going to be added to the White Sox with the #1 pick, and it's even more to be excited about if you're a Chicago White Sox fan. But if you're a baseball fan, you should absolutely be tuned into this. And everyone that listened tonight, we hope you guys got some good information here. You enjoyed us. If you are new to the show and you tuned in because you saw the guest, you saw the draft coverage or the prospect coverage, haven't listened to us before, stick with us. All right, we put out a weekly episode or two. Sometimes it's just Steve and I. Sometimes we get an expert guest on here for different subjects, but we talk about all baseball, everything baseball, Major League Baseball. We cover it, the whole league. We are not biased to just East Coast, West Coast, middle of the country. We're going to talk about it all. And exciting times with the All-Star break coming up, the draft, and everything else that goes with it.
So again, we want to thank Jonathan again for joining us, and we want to make sure to hype up his book again, Smart, Wrong, and Lucky, The Origin Stories of Baseball's Unexpected Stars. Book he has out on Amazon, I think came out a couple years ago. He also has that new podcast. Make sure you guys check that out as well about minor league baseball. A lot of fun stuff going on there. And of course, check out his work on MLB Pipeline. As for us, you can check us out at Tablesetters Pod on IG and on X. Devin running the X machine over there with a lot of great conversation. We're up to about 7,500 followers, something of the like, because Devin's posting those notables on the daily. So make sure you guys check that out and interact with us. Ask us questions. Let us know what you thought about this conversation. What do you think about who you think is going to go #1 in the MLB draft in a few short days? Again, we appreciate all the support. And if you can, please leave a 5-star review. We are in the thick of the baseball season. Goes a very long way. Helps the algorithm find other baseball fans and brings us to their ears. And we want to make the baseball community a little bit stronger. Continue to talk about the game we all love.
Yeah, man, it's been fun. Some people are distracted by the World Cup for these last couple weeks, but I don't know. As we speak, it's not looking very good for our country. Team USA there with just about 10 minutes left, down by 2 goals. So maybe some people that are distracted by that will come back to baseball, and it's going to explode. Looking forward to the home run derby as well. Lots of fun stuff to talk about. I mean, I don't know if it could possibly be as dramatic as last year's swing off, but fingers crossed. I mean, that's the All-Star game, I guess, but fingers crossed we get some kind of drama there that makes it all that more interesting. But again, thanks for tuning in, guys. We appreciate it. Hopefully you come back to us.
So we'll be back next week talking all things baseball. Until that time, we'll talk to you after a while. And as always, happy baseball.